Sophie Cunningham just said what many people had been waiting for someone to say out loud about Brittney Griner. She stood in front of the cameras after Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever put up 123 points against the Connecticut Sun, and she called for a ban on men playing in women's sports. There was no hesitation and no apology. Everyone watching understood exactly what she meant. So, let's break down what she actually said, why the timing was not an accident, and what this could mean for the rest of the season as she goes after Griner. Let me know down in the comments below if you stand with Sophie Cunningham.
I played with BG for 6 years, and so I know her like the back of my hand.
On that same vein, in that story with ESPN, you talked about wanting to protect young girls who shouldn't have to go against biological men. Just can you expand your viewpoint on that?
I mean, I think I said what I said. I think it's kind of common sense. And I think I'll always believe in that. I think it's really important to protect children, and that's little girls who are also involved in that category. And so I stand on what I said, and I always believe that.
Clark drives into the paint. Griner leans in. And there it is again. Contact that knocks Clark out of her rhythm, and once again, no whistle follows. Fans replayed that clip countless times on social media because it looked exactly like something they had seen before. And that is the problem. This is not the first time. Go back to 2025, when the Fever were facing Griner's former team, the Atlanta Dream. There was Griner pushing into Clark with a body check that was so obvious that the broadcast replays caught it from 3 different angles. Griner said something from the bench during that game as well, and the cameras picked up enough for fans to figure out the rest. That night, the referees kept their whistles in their pockets. So when it happened again in 2026 against a different team in a different arena, people were no longer calling it a coincidence.
We have heard nothing from the WNBA, absolutely nothing.
Brittney Griner elbowing Caitlin Clark in a crazy way and then calling her a trash white girl.
And Brittney Griner has not commented, which I find significant. I've watched that video countless times, and it sure looks like Brittney Griner says, white girl.
The WNBA should investigate Brittney Griner's seemingly profane comments about a white girl. During the July 22 game against Connecticut, the pattern did not just repeat, it became even more noticeable. Clark gets bumped while going through a screen, and there is no call. She takes a hard hit to the arm while driving, and again there is no call. Then she points at the scoreboard after making a basket. Just pointing, nothing more. And somehow, that is the moment the referees decide to blow the whistle and hit her with a technical foul. Think about that for a second. Real contact gets ignored throughout the game, but pointing at a scoreboard gets flagged. Fans inside the arena booed loudly enough that you could clearly hear it on the broadcast. The commentators calling the game started asking out loud why the same 3 or 4 missed calls kept going in the same direction. And by the third quarter, social media had already turned it into a major debate about whether this officiating crew was specifically targeting Clark.
Look at this finish. Down low. She's been doing this all year. I am so impressed with her inside game. She gets inside that paint amongst the giants and just destroys people. Caitlin Clark, another sweet feed. And watch this. They called a timeout, not a foul. Watch her grab Caitlin Clark's arm clearly. Like, they didn't call this a foul. Look at that. Are you kidding me?
And Clark's frustration is not happening in a vacuum. She has already picked up 7 technical fouls this season, and every single one gets mentioned whenever people talk about the possibility of a suspension hanging over her head. So picture the pressure she is playing under. Every bump, every shove, and every missed call slowly chips away at her composure, but she cannot react too strongly because she risks getting another technical and moving one step closer to missing a game that actually matters. That is the trap. Take the hit and stay quiet, or push back and risk punishment. Clark's competitive fire is exactly what makes her must-watch basketball. But that same fire keeps getting used against her every time the referee keeps the whistle in their pocket.
Everyone always is coming at it as a negative. Well, me coming out with that, there's so many people who are coming out with the positive saying, you know what, finally someone has said something. And I don't really look at either side of those, because I know whatever I say, I'm gonna get hate and I'm gonna get love. And if I'm gonna live by the love, I'm gonna die by the hate. And that's just not who I am. I beat to my own drum. And so people are always gonna have something to say. You could win the championship, you could be the best at whatever it is, and there's still people who are gonna hate on you. And so that's just what this world is. So I'm confident in who I am. I'm proud of who I am. I'm happy being me. And I'm gonna continue to be that.
That was the moment Cunningham decided she was not staying quiet anymore. Watching her teammate take hit after hit, possession after possession, game after game, while getting punished for simply pointing at the scoreboard instead. Something inside Cunningham finally snapped, not in a reckless way, but in a calculated one. She had seen enough footage, heard enough excuses, and watched enough missed calls continue to pile up. So when the final buzzer sounded on a 123-88 blowout, Cunningham walked toward the cameras with something to say. And this time, she was not going to let it slide.
When it comes just to protecting young girls in sport and women in sport, I feel very strongly about that. I think that's why you have Title IX. That's why you have some of the greats in women's sports. If Title IX and women's sports weren't protected, then you wouldn't hear about any type of women in sport. And so I think in the future, it's just really important to protect.
The final buzzer had barely stopped echoing, and Cunningham was already walking toward the microphones. There was no hesitation and no looking around for approval. She went straight toward the cameras like she had been waiting for this exact moment. Reporters barely had time to get a question out before she started talking about protecting women's sports. She was not vague about it either. She directly said that men should not be allowed to play in women's leagues, and she said girls deserve locker rooms where they can feel safe. Nobody in that room expected her to take the conversation there, but she did. And she did not back down while saying it. She talked about the laws that are meant to protect fairness for women in sports, and she framed her entire position around love and truth instead of simply reacting out of frustration. That is what caught people off guard. It was not a rant. It was calm. It was direct, and it sounded like something she had thought about for a long time before finally saying it out loud in front of the cameras.
I don't dislike anyone. I think there is room for absolutely everyone here, and I think there's room to love everyone. And I truly think when you get people in the same room and you have conversations, you actually have a lot in common with a lot of people. And so I'm there to love, but I'm also there to love biological women. And I think that there are rights that need to be protected. And like I said, I'm going to stand true to that. I'll never falter in my beliefs in that, but I have never once said I hated the trans community. Like I said, I think there's space for everyone.
If you have followed the news about Griner over the years, you can immediately connect the dots and understand why Cunningham specifically chose that moment to break her silence. She did not need to spell everything out because the context spoke for itself. And the timing, coming right after another night playing against Griner, made the target obvious to everyone watching. What made her comments hit even harder was the contrast. Her voice stayed calm the entire time. There was no yelling and no finger pointing, just steady eye contact with the reporters standing in front of her. But online, the reaction exploded within minutes. Clips of her comments spread across social media before she had even left the podium, and the reaction immediately split between people cheering her on and others accusing her of sending a coded message. Either way, everybody was talking about it, and that is exactly the kind of reaction a carefully planned statement is designed to create.
Going to be some negative comments, but there's also a whole bunch of positive comments too that no one really ever, people hate positivity for some reason. I have no idea why, but there's a lot of positive comments too when it comes to that. And so, it is what it is. Like I said, we're all human. No one's perfect here. And so I really don't care what other people have to say. I know who I am. My people know who I am. And hopefully I'm doing them proud and making room for young boys and girls in our world to have a better future than we did.
Support came in quickly. Fans flooded the comment sections, calling her brave and saying she was the first player with the courage to say what so many people had been thinking for years. USA Today picked up the story within hours. ESPN discussed it across its shows the next morning, and the LA Times followed with its own breakdown of the comments and the reaction. Other players stayed quieter, with some posting vague messages of support without naming anyone, which only added to the feeling that Cunningham had said something many people agreed with but were afraid to say themselves. Some fans even started calling her a folk hero in the replies, saying she had done what no one else in the league was willing to do. That kind of reaction does not happen by accident, and it does not come from a simple slip of the tongue either. This looked planned. She chose her words. She chose her moment. And she chose the biggest possible stage to make her position clear. Now, the conversation about fairness in the league is no longer some quiet debate happening in private group chats. It has become major sports news, and it all traces back to one calm and carefully delivered post-game interview. To understand why her words hit as hard as they did, you have to go back further because this did not come out of nowhere.
As you know, this is something the president feels strongly about as well, and the American people do too, that men should not be playing in women's sports. It's completely ludicrous that anyone could support that. It's even more ludicrous that you do have Sophie Cunningham, a female athlete herself, very accomplished in her own right, coming forth and speaking that truth that men shouldn't play in women's sports. We want to protect women and girls. They are clearly very out of touch with the American public on this issue, which again is an 80-20 issue. It's common sense. It's rooted in basic biological fact that men should not be competing against women on playing.
Why does this same matchup keep boiling over every single time these two share the court? It is not just one incident. It is a pattern that has been building for 3 years. And every time people think things have finally settled down, something else happens that pushes it right back into the headlines. Go back through the seasons and the timeline starts to build itself. Small shoves during rebounds. Words exchanged after whistles. Nothing ever serious enough to force the league to step in, but enough for fans who were paying close attention to start keeping track. Every clash added another layer, and by the time 2025 arrived, people were already expecting fireworks whenever Griner and Clark ended up on the same floor. Then came the Atlanta Dream game. And this time, it is worth paying attention to the bench chatter, not just the physical contact. Cameras caught Griner talking from the sideline. And while the broadcast could not clearly pick up every word, enough of it was heard for fans to quickly fill in the blanks. That is the part that stayed with people longer than the body check itself. A body check can happen during the flow of a game, and you can argue that it is simply physical basketball. But saying something from the bench, away from the play and without any real basketball reason, feels personal. And fans immediately saw it that way.
Brittney Griner, who I can't stand, sad that she's a Baylor grad. She called her a trash, expletive white girl. That was the lip reading. Yes, trash, white girl. Trash, blanking, white girl, is what she says.
And every single time, the response from the officials and the league seems to land the same way. It is quiet, with no real statement and no real discipline, just a missed call in the moment followed by silence afterward. That is what builds resentment because when the same type of incident keeps getting minimized again and again, people stop seeing it as an accident and start seeing it as a pattern that the league does not want to address. Beneath all of this, there have also been rumors and speculation about Griner's identity and gender. That kind of speculation can spread quickly when people feel like the league is protecting someone instead of holding them accountable. That is why Cunningham's comments hit the way they did. She did not simply react to one game. She gave a voice to something that many fans felt had been building for years, not just days. People were not only reacting to her words. They were reacting to finally hearing someone inside the league speak openly about the issue instead of leaving the conversation to anonymous accounts online.
Flag you, Brittney. Let me see something real quick. Brick, thank you. Get the hell out of here, yo.
Down there, watch.
Jab stepping, it's a brick. Swing and a miss.
Oh!
Yo, I ain't gonna fake it right now.
That this person is not a female. Firstly, because this was actually posted to Brittney's personal Instagram.
And this is not happening in a bubble either. The whole conversation connects directly to the bigger national debate about male athletes competing in women's sports. It is an argument that has been heated across every level of athletics, from high school track to the Olympics. Cunningham stepping into that conversation from a WNBA post-game podium puts this rivalry directly into a debate that is much bigger than one game or one player. Fans quickly picked up on specific words from Cunningham's comments, with some saying she had exposed Griner and others describing it as if she had finally settled the argument simply by having the courage to say it out loud.
They use a combination of like AI detection and plus manual surveyors, but specifically the AI detection to make sure that no explicit content ends up on the platform. So clearly whatever AI detection system was used when Brittney posted this and it stayed up for 106 weeks was not like, oh, this is a bare female chest, we have to take this down. It obviously assumed that Brittney was male.
Cunningham's words gave that belief a voice loud enough to spread across every major outlet covering the story. So when people look back at July 22nd, they are not just going to remember a blowout final score. They are going to remember it as the night 3 years of tension finally came out into the open, on the record, with a name attached to it. And once the emotional part of the story had its moment, the Fever still had a basketball game to finish. And they finished it by putting up numbers that nobody in that building expected to see. 123 points. That is the number that made the entire league stop and pay attention that night. The final score was Fever 123, Sun 88. And by the time that number appeared on the scoreboard, everyone watching knew they had just witnessed something that does not happen twice in a season.
It's on both sides. Boston over to her fellow All-Star, and Caitlin Clark gets the scoring started for Indiana. An area to watch throughout. Mitchell, the fastest in the W. Clark, 2 for 2. From outside the arc is Caitlin Clark.
My friend. we knew where you were going.
Some preserves. Caitlin Clark, 3 for 3 from outside.
It started from tip-off, and Clark took control immediately, pushing the pace before the Sun could even settle into their defense. The Fever jumped out early and never looked back, scoring in waves. And every trip down the floor seemed faster than the last. Clark was not just scoring. She was setting up her teammates in rhythm, finding cutters, hitting shooters in stride, and turning what should have been a normal possession into an easy 2 points over and over again. Her final stat line was 27 points and 11 assists, and she did it all in only 27 minutes. Think about that pace for a second. It was almost a point per minute combined with nearly an assist every 2 minutes. And she did not even need a full game to get there. That kind of efficiency does not happen by accident. It happens when a player reads the defense faster than the defense can react. And Clark spent the entire night staying one step ahead of Connecticut.
Stephanie White was asked in the pregame. And Clark hits her 4-3. He's got 4 in 8 minutes. Clark, 5 for 5. Come on, Caitlin, shoot till your arm falls off.
She was not doing it alone either. Aaliyah Boston put up an impressive stat line of her own with 22 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists, working in the paint and creating plays from the post like a point forward. Kelsey Mitchell added 23 points, knocking down shot after shot while moving without the ball. And when you put those three together, Clark, Boston, and Mitchell, the Sun simply did not have an answer when all three were clicking in the same game. By halftime, the scoreboard showed 70 points for Indiana, a franchise record for the most points scored in any half in team history. 70 points in 20 minutes of basketball is the kind of number you usually expect to see in a blowout college game, not a professional matchup against a team that is supposed to compete for the postseason. That was the pace the Fever set early, and they never took their foot off the gas. By the final buzzer, the box score showed 15 records broken in a single game. Most points scored in a game, most points scored in a half, and their 11th 100-point game of the season, tying a mark for the entire league. Add career nights for multiple players, along with team records for assists and bench scoring, and you start to understand why analysts kept repeating the number 15 like it needed to be said twice.
It's one of the reasons that they are struggling to find that rhythm. Oh, Mitchell, the no-look over to Boston for the deuce.
Extraordinary. And it's not just as we talked about her scoring. Look at that pass. Coming off the screen, the quickness. They just feed it in stride to an Aaliyah ball.
Here is the stat that catches people off guard, though. 10 different players scored that night, and 8 of them shot 50% or better from the field. This was not one superstar dropping 50 points while everyone else stood around and watched. This was an entire roster clicking on both ends of the court, knocking down open shots, running the offense smoothly, and sharing the ball like it was the start of a title run. And remember everything that happened earlier with the officiating, the missed calls, the questionable technical foul, and the pattern fans could not stop talking about. The Fever did not let any of it slow them down. They played through bad calls. They played through the frustration. And they still put up the biggest offensive performance in franchise history. That is the part that made the win feel even bigger because it happened despite everything working against them, not because the game was easy.
He has turned into, especially over these last few weeks. Boston, deep position, size advantage, and one!
When you run ahead of the back.
Right now, Clark, Boston, and Mitchell look like one of the best trios in the league, full stop. But a night like this does not happen with just 3 players carrying the entire load, and the rest of the roster made sure of that. Add it all up, and the bench finished with 31 points combined. And that number matters much more than it might seem at first glance. Teams that rely too heavily on their starters can run out of energy by the time the playoffs arrive, but a bench scoring 31 points means the starters can get real rest. And the Fever can maintain this same pace deep into a long postseason run without wearing themselves down. Boston's impact was all over this game too, and not just on the scoreboard. She was grabbing rebounds, pushing the ball up the floor the second she secured one, and turning defense into points in transition before the Sun could even get back on defense. Her passing out of the post kept creating easy opportunities for Mitchell cutting off screens and Hall waiting open in the corner. That pick and roll with Boston and Clark, or Boston and Mitchell, kept putting pressure on the defense every single time. And once the Sun committed to stopping one action, someone else was left wide open on the weak side. Depth is what separates good teams from dangerous ones, and the Fever proved that again on July 22nd. 3 stars can win regular season games, but a bench that scores 31 points and a two-way anchor like Boston controlling the glass, that is what can win championships. This was not just a win on a random Wednesday in July. Cunningham stood up and said what she believed needed to be said. Clark played through every missed call and kept scoring anyway. And the entire roster showed up to make sure the final score left no room for debate. That is what strong competition looks like when nobody is cutting corners. Keep watching how this shapes the MVP race and the championship push through the rest of 2026 because the scoreboard read 123-88. But the real result people will remember is fairness against excuses. And on July 22nd, fairness won by a landslide. Let me know down in the comments below if you stand with Sophie Cunningham. And do not forget to like, subscribe, and turn on all notifications as we bring you all the action and top stories. Click the video on the screen, and we will see you in the next one.